Hey everyone, welcome back to Netcode-Hub channel. I am Frederick and I'm happy to have you here today. In this video, we are going to look at custom cookie authentication in .NET 8 Blazor web app with interactive WebAssembly render mode. I've made a video on how to create cookie authentication in interactive server render mode, and this video is focusing on the WebAssembly render mode. When we say cookie, it is just a piece of token which is set to the cookie storage of a browser and which holds the identity of the user. Anytime a request is being made, the token or the cookie has to be retrieved by the server, verifies it, and grant access to the user. And now in this case, we have a default one. That is when you use the individual account. And this time around too, we are going to look at how to customize that into a small unit that you can implement it easily in your application. So before we dive right into this, make sure you have subscribed already and also click on the notification bell to receive updates as soon as I do upload new video like this. Also like this video to support this channel and this video as well. The source code of this project will be available as you know already, so if you want to grab it to just guide you, check the video description and it will be available. If you want to have a look on the authentication, the custom cookie authentication using the interactive server render mode, then check the playlist. It's all found under the description, so you can actually check it over there. I do offer coaching session to people who are interested in .NET technologies, talking about Blazor, WebAssembly, server, .NET 8, Web API, Mari, Blazor Hybrid, and a lot. So if you're interested, check the video description. I have an email in there. You can write to me through it. Alright, so let's dive right into this. We're going to create a new project. So we'll launch our Visual Studio 2022 and I click on new project. I know by now you know how to create project, isn't it? Yes, of course. So click on Blazor web app and here we're going to give the name as custom cookie auth Blazor WebAssembly. What I'm trying to mean here, custom cookie authentication in Blazor web app with WebAssembly interactive render mode. So choose a location here and I click on next to get this project created. So once the project has finished creating, what we're going to do here is we're going to install our packages for the client and also the server. Aside from installing the packages, we are going to create our connection strings and now add database services and etc. to get the database of IdentityDB context, because we're going to use Identity Manager in this. So we have to add the services and now perform migration. Good. And I believe for that, you know how to do it already, isn't it? Now, when we are done, we're going to add IdentityDB context. There's not a connection for database, rather for user manager. Okay, you're going to add a service to it. After adding the services, we're going to create two classes, one in the server and now one in the client. The server one, you're going to name it as persistent server authentication state provider. And now the client one is going to be persistent authentication state provider. Why are we creating these two classes? Per the research, the persistent server authentication state provider prepares authentication of the user in the server. That is when server side is rendering. That is server side rendering. And now it's sent it to the client. Now when it gets to the client, the state of the authentication must be maintained and it must be utilized as well. And that is where the persistent authentication state provider comes in. So it makes sure that the authentication which has been received from the server is intact and it then utilizes in the client side rendering. You see, so we need these two classes, one for each of the projects. Okay, once you're done, we create our pages, log in, and now register, and now off you go. So these are the stages that are going to pass through to finish this cookie or custom cookie authentication with interactive WebAssembly render mode. Now you have the gist of it. Let's get going. Now when you go to the solution, you can see we have two projects in here. We have the client, this one, and that is the server. So that's how we're going to create our custom authentication too. We focus on the server, then we're going to consume it in the client. Very simple one. Okay, so all the work are going to happen in the client, not in the server. And now when we are done, the client is just going to consume it. Very simple way. Okay, now let's install packages in here. And you know, since you're going to use IdentityDB context, it means we need a EF core tools, and now SQL Server. So right click on dependencies, and now let's add these packages. So click on the browse tab, and in here we're going to search for the efcore.tools .tools, and that again we have SQL Server and now the EF-core itself. Okay, so here that's what we have. So for me, since I have the package reference already, I'll just close this. Then I'll right click on the server side. I'll go to unload project, and now from this section, the item group, I'm going to paste it in here. So what I need to do here is just type in an item group, and I'll paste this here. This is the one that I need. Okay, so I'll add them in here. So we need 3 packages: EF-core, SQL Server, and now tools. Okay, let's save this. Right click solution, right click this, and now reload project with dependencies. We then go to the client to right click on the client, again go to unload project, and I'm going to add the same thing to this. That is the component.webassembly.authentication. So this is what we need. Then let's save this as well, and now go to reload project with dependencies. So when you check dependencies packages, you can see we have the packages in here, right? When you check for the dependencies packages for the client, we also have them here. What left here is to build this together. So let's build solution. All right, so you can see that the project building is completed and our tools are seeded. It means that all the projects are built. The next thing that we're going to do here is to create our application user. Now we can defaultly, when you use identity user, it has a default built-in properties, and here maybe you would like to add some properties to this. So maybe you're going to extend the class, and we're going to add maybe username. Okay, so we have to do that. Let's come to, and this must be held in the server project, so take note. Let's add maybe class, a folder here, and I'm going to say this about authentication. So everything here is about authentication. Right click on this, you're going to add a class to, and I'm going to name it as app user for short. This app user is going to inherit from identity user. Identity user, and now this is coming from, let's see, so Microsoft, yes, Netcode identity. So this has some default properties, and we want to add name to this. So in case you have any extra properties, you just add it. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Now aside from doing this, let's now go in and create our AppDB contest. So in the authentication, I'm going to add my AppDB contest class. And now this class is going to inherit from IdentityDB contest. And now within this, you have to pass in the app user that we created. We can create constructor for this. Then we pass in this AppDB contest class. Okay. You need not to create any table here, okay, because this has it all. That's what we need to do. So let's save this. The next thing that you're going to do is to create our connection string in the app setting.json. So here we're going to say that connection strings, then you're going to be default connection. So I'd like to name it as only default. Now server is equal to local, and database, this equal to wasm. So I'm going to say cookie db. Now aside from this, I'm going to say trust server certificate, or this trusted connection. Set this to true, and our trust server certificate, let's set this to true as well. Okay, so this is what that we need to do. Let's save this. The next to do is register the connection string in the program.cs file. So go to the next stage, and then before the app build, you're going to say builder.services.addDBContest. We pass in this appDBContest class that we created. In that, we're going to pass in an option .useSQLServer, and in here we have to provide the class connection string that we created. So get connection string, and that is this one. And what is the name? Do you remember? That is default. So default, you must make sure it is the same. Okay, so default, you can just cross check it. So copy this, you go to app settings, and I make sure it is the same. That's fine. Okay, so now that we are done, we need to register the identity manager service. So down here, we're going to say builder.services.add identity core, this one, passing the app user. So here dot add entity framework store, and the store will need an application appDBContest class. Aside from this, you pass in add sign-in manager, and the last one, add default token providers. Okay, so we need to add this service in here. Okay, now that we are done, we can go ahead and perform our migration. So let's save this. We're going to build everything again. So build solution. Okay, so now that this is built, we're going to perform migration. We go to package manager console, and in here we're going to add dash migration. We want to put this, so migration, and I'm going to say this is first. Now after this has been created, we're going to update database. Now this is going to create all tables that are necessary for this identity or user manager. Okay, so you can see we have a lot of tables being created. When you check here, you know this already, so I need not to explain. But if you don't know, these are the tables that is going to create, and these are the columns I'm going to create for each. And all these are coming from this guy, this one. Okay, good. Okay, so we have the table, we have a database created. If you want to actually check it, click on SQL Server Object Explorer. Then in here you have to check the service. My server here is a local, so I'm going for this SQL service, and that's the last one, desktop. So go to database, and you can see cookie db, cookie wasm or db. This is the database, and if I open the tables, you can see that you're going to have a lot of tables in here. So let's wait for the table to get loaded. You can see you have all this table coming out from the AidentityDBContest class. That's fine. Okay, so this is even the cookie db. So when it's a cookie db, it is the same. Okay, so tables, let's close this. Yeah, you can see we have the same thing in here. So now that we are done, we're going to now prepare user authentication. Okay, so in that we have to create our persistent server authentication state provider, as I said earlier on. This is going to inherit from server authentication state provider, and now this prepares the user authentication using the persistent component states service. Okay, then aside from that, it prepares it, send to the client, and now in the client persistent authentication state provider, also which inherit from the authentication state provider, receives it and now maintain it and utilize it in the client session when the app is running in an CSR, that is client side rendering. But in the server side rendering as SSR, it is the persistent server authentication state provider. So let's go in there and create that class. So from the authentication, we're going to add a new class to this, and I'm going to say that is persistent server authentication states provider. Okay, so that is a name, very long. Persistent server authentication state provider. Okay, so we have this, and now this class is inheriting from server. So server, do you have it? Let's see, server authentication state provider. Okay, and in that you have to implement the interface for iDisposable. Then you need to implement something like this, an interface in here. Okay, that's the dispose method to get rid of that error. Okay, so in here what I'm going to do, let's have our private read only property for persistent component states. So this is, so that will be this one. And aside from that, we have this persistent component state. We also have to get our identity options. So let's also get this property also here. The next one, we need our component state subscription. So we need to get this guy. So these are properties that we are setting. And the next one, we need our authentication task. So let's also have this one. So we have private only because aside from this scope, we don't want to be using this. We want to maintain it to the scope of this. Okay, so we have to generate a constructor and we need to register. So from here, we create our constructor, and there's a constructor. So we pass in this persistent component state, and now we're initializing it in here. So state is equal to this persistent component state, so we initialize it in here. Okay, now authentication state change, we want to call this method. We haven't called any method yet, so we're going to write the definition for this method. Okay, when authentication changes, that's where we want to get this guy called. Okay, so on authentication state change, we want to just assign the authentication task to the current task that we have, and that is exactly what we're doing from the next one. So on authentication state change, we pass in, it's going to call, or it's going to pass in this as a payload, and now we assign the property that we created in here to the outcome or the results of this task. Okay, good. Now we are done. We go to the next one, that's the on persistent async. So in this method, what we're going to do here is we're going to extract, because when the page loads, when the page refreshes, the component state is going to be sent from here, or we're going to prepare the user authentication and now send it to the client. Okay, so we need to pass in properties that we need, such as our claims and etc. And the claim, you could use an ID, name, email, and etc. So that's where you need to provide or prepare all these materials. Okay, that's what we're going to be using. So here with on persistent async, what are we doing? We first want to assign or get the authentication of the user, and that's what we are doing here. So we assign this authentication state provider to the task that we have been assigned it in here. And aside from that, we want to grab the principal of that user, so you can get it from this authentication state. And quickly, let's grab that. Okay, so render mode, we need to include this one. So we get the user. So now when we get the user, we can now go in and extract the user info. So we're going to extract it. Let's first check if user authenticated. That is where you want to do this, because if user is not authenticated, it means you don't have any current claims, and you cannot extract claims once they are not there. Okay, so you want to make sure they are there. And here we need maybe the user ID. You need user ID in here. We also need user email, and maybe we're gonna need a name, so we can add one. And let's say this is name. So we can have an extension of name, username. Okay, so do you have username? We have username in here. So maybe since we are not having that, we can just get the name directly from the claims, which is coming from the principal, and we can just search for the name that we added and I get the value. Okay, so we have these 3 claims, and that's what we're going to be using. Okay, but here, in order to send these 3 properties to the client, we need to have a class, okay, to handle all this, because it is appropriate to put everything in a model so we can just send it once and for all. Okay, so in that we need to create a class, and this class you can name it as user info and etc. So maybe we can just go to the client, and now since you're going to consume this in the client, we need to put it in the client so we can be using, or you can add model to this and I'll add it in here, but don't worry, you can actually add it from this. So with this too, we're going to say this an authentication from the client, and we're going to add a class. This class is going to be an user info, and within that user info, we definitely going to use user ID. This user ID, you know, it is supposed to be string, and we need an email for this. And email, you know, is also what, string, and you can add last one, and that's going to be name. Okay, so we need these 3 properties, and now in here we can just go in there and now check. So before we check in, before we assign this or we populating this to the model, we can just check it first to see if the claim that it got, none of them is null, before we start working on it. Okay, so if user ID is equal to null, and let's add this, let's add the name as well, because we added that. So and so this time round is not going to be name. Email is not going to be what? Name. So if they are not null, that is only when you want to prepare this from the component state. So let's say we want to prepare them here, so we grab them and add the user info, and here you can see from this namespace we are adding it from here, and that is from the client authentication folder. Okay, we are not using row for now, so we change this to name, and now we are making a reference of this name. If it is row that you want to also add, then you add it as a row, and that's all. Okay, so now that this is set and done, when the page disposes, you want to dispose the subscription, and also you want to remove the authentication state change. Yes, so that's all we need to do. Very simple one as well, and that is it one. Okay, so let's save this, then we can now close this. After creating this, you know, definitely we have to register the service, isn't it? Yeah, so we go to the solution, program, and now in here we can add the service. So builder.services.add, let's first add cascading authentication state before we forget it again, and then let's add builder.services dot, this is going to be scope, and now we need our, what's the name? We have persistent authentication state provider, and now this is coming from, you know, this is supposed to be here, supposed to be authentication state provider because it is coming from this. Okay, so auth state provider, then persistent auth state provider. So we are creating a scope dependency injection between this provider, the main one, and then there's the fake one. Okay, so that's all we need to do in here. Okay, so aside from that, we go to our route, and route can be found in the component folder, and in a route.razor, we're never going to find it in here. Okay, so inside this route, we need to make some few changes in here. Okay, so in here, I'm going to just replace this one, and we have main.layout. So you know where it's coming from. We have to include the namespace in here using this authorization. And now with this redirect to login, we're going to create this later on. So for now, we can comment this up. Okay, so this is a normal thing that we are doing. All that I did was to add this authorized route view, and if it is not authorized, you want to redirect to login. Okay, that is all thing all that I did. And now here we need not to, at first when you check .NET 7, .NET 6 and below, we have to add cascading authentication state markup or the component to surround this, isn't it? Good. But for now, since it has turned to a service and you have added a service, then I don't think you need to use that. So you can skip it. If you decide to also bring it, well, it will be there. But if you skip it, it's still going to work. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to work on the sign out. Now, when using Identity Manager, if you want to sign out, you must sign out in an HTTP context. And now this happens only when a call is being made to an API. That's where you can have access to this. Else, when you decide to use an HTTP context as a cascading value and you want to sign out, it's not going to work. Okay, because that instance it is only read only. If you can have access to this to sign out, then we have to use a minimal API. Okay, so we're going to create one minimal API, and that's what we're going to use to sign out. If we actually check the original docs or the original implementation of this, when you choose individual account, you can see that the same thing is what you're going to do here. Okay, so no different, the same thing. Just that we're going to scrap all the ones that we don't need and I maintain the only ones that we need, and that's only one here, one for sign out. Okay, so this is going to happen in the server. You see that we are still working in the server. We haven't touched the client yet, so we are still working in here. Okay, so let's right click on this, and the name is too long for me, so let me just copy this from here. So right click on the authentication, we're going to add a class to this, and now this is going to be identity component endpoints route builder extension. Very long. Okay, so the reason why the name is too long here is when you go to program.cs, it is coming from this builder extension. Okay, so we're going to implement as a part of this, and it's also an identity, is an endpoint, so that's why they combine it. But well, you can just modify this to make it a small one for yourself. Okay, so now let's go back. Now we have this must be an internal and it must be a static class, so we're going to use it in here only. Okay, now within this we need to create a static method which at the end is going to return our endpoint convention builder. So let's say it's going to return our endpoint convention builder, and now this is the name map additional entity endpoint, and now within this we can pass in the I endpoint route builder as a parameter, and now the extent that we're going to create going to affect this. So anytime or wherever we are, we can grab the context from this endpoint route builder. Straightforward. Okay, so maybe would it be possible if I bring it here? Okay, then let's see. So now that we have this, what are we going to do? Very simple. Endpoint, we're going to check if it is now. We can try an exception or we can skip this. I don't think this is necessary for now. Okay, so let's create our account group. We map the group in here. So if we want to check this, we create an account group, and now the account group, the route here is an account / account, and we have a method known as logout. So the full route is going to be account / logout. Okay, we inject our principal, then assigning manager, which is coming from this app user, not application, which comes from the app user, and then here we have a signing manager because that's the instance of the signing manager. And I know this manager can assist us in signing in and signing out. So while it gets up to this with a context, we can just rather sign out in here. When we sign out, we want to redirect to the home page. So you can specify If you want to redirect to any page of your choice, you can just pass in maybe lockout, then this and that. But as soon as you sign out, you go to the home page. Okay, that's what we are doing for now. Okay, now let's save this. So we are done with this. Now what we need to do is to register this. So where can we do it? What do you think? Definitely going to do it in the service. Not the service, the program. So go to program.ts file, and now what we have this pipelines, we're going to pipe it line in here. So let's say app.map identity, that is one. Okay, we have to map it in this format. Very simple one, and that is all. Okay, there comes in our form. So we need to create our login and our register forms. Right click on the pages and let's add, maybe we can add a folder here and I'll name it as authentication, or we can keep going and add a page. Let's make this as login. So in here on top, we need to inject our sign-in manager, user manager, and also navigation manager. You need to inject this. Aside from that, you can specify login to this. So maybe account/login or just login only. There's a route login. Okay. Now this must come from Microsoft.ASP.NET identity. So we have to include the namespace in here. Okay. Let's save this. And now this must be an app user, not application. So app user. And you know we must add the reference. So we must include this reference in here. Okay. Now we have to design our form, but before we design our form, we have to create a model. And maybe this is going to be a model we're going to maintain what we have already, default one. And down here we're going to have our input model. So there's a suite class, and we have to include this data annotation, and we have email and password. Okay, so we don't want to remember me for now. We want to have only email and password. Okay, so once you have this, we're going ahead to create an instance of this. So you want to say that from here we have form input model as input, then we create a new. Now if I click on, or if I fill up the model and I click on login, this is what I want to execute. I want to just log in the user. So let's have this method in here, very simple one. So login async, and now if I log in user, this is what I'm doing. Okay, so we have this public, and I think we have to close this. Yes. And for this error, I think you have to create a property to handle this. On top here, string error, and now you have it set. Okay, now claim types, we need to include system.claims to get this also solved. Now you can see from here that we find the user by the email that has been entered. If we find it, we're going to get here. We don't need to get rows here because you're not adding rows for now. So in case you add rows, then you have to get the rows and also add it in here. So for now, let me just remove the rows. Okay, we want to just have only authentication for now. So we have claims, we have a list of claims, and we have a name and email. Okay, we have user ID, you can also add that. Then here we can sign in manager, you can check the password. If they correspond, then we want to now sign in, and I return maybe errors to reward success, or there's going to be a message or anything else that you want to, or you can just remove this in case you are in. This is what you're doing. So you're going to password sign in, and that's what you provide the name, that's the app user, then we provide the password. And now here we are checking if I click on comma here, it tells you the next step, is it persistent, then is it lockout on failure, so it's no, we set false. And that's what that we need to do in here. Very simple one. Okay, now let's have our model created, or there's a form, an edit form. We can create an edit form for this, and I am using the default login. So this is a default login. We have the username, we have the password, and that is it. I want to remove this remember me because I don't want to integrate this now. Okay, then we have our button. It's an edit form. We have the model and the method here. It is post. We have form name in here. We provide the method and now the form name for it to, because this is going to render in static way, so this is a static rendering. And if you do not provide this, it's not going to work. Okay, so we have to, or if you take out this one, then you have to include interactive render mode as what? WebAssembly. Okay, so that's what we are doing, and here we're displaying an error to the user. Alright, now this is all that we have. We have to work on the registration too. So let's create a registration component. The same pages, I'm going to right click on this and create a component known as register. So with this too, we need our user manager. So this is what we can do. We can just move the ones that we have inside this, the login, to import.razor, or we can still repeat this. This is the best way. Okay, so we should not repeat this because when you check the login, we have it already. So we can just grab it from here to the register. Okay. So down here, we need to also create a model for log registration. So we have name, email, password, and a confirmed password. Okay. Now, aside from having this, in case I click on register, what do I want to do? First, let's create an object out of this, after the model. So input model for the register. And now in here, if I click on register, what am I going to do? We want to execute this. We first have to create an instance of this app user and now pass and populate it. So that's what we are doing. We are assigning to this and we can now keep moving. So here must be an app user, as you know, that is a model. Aside from doing that, we're going to create user async. So from here, once you have everything, create it, because this password is going to hash the password of the user automatically, and we can now create the user account. If it is accessed, or in case it is not, what you want to do, you can just retrieve it. But let's assume it is access, then that is all. Okay. So you see, this is very simple. So register user and now create the user. Very simple one. Okay. Now let's save this. So we have a login, we have a register. Now we have sign out. So now let's go to the nav menu. And this can be found in the shared or the layouts, because we have a nav menu in here. And with this, we want to replace this one with this, because here we have this authorized attribute surrounded with, and this we need to include the namespace. Okay, so at using this authorized view, you need to include them here. So what we are doing here is, now I want to check this authorized view. Okay, now I want to check this. We want to, this an auth required. If I click on this, but for now we want to remove this. You don't want that one. So you want to display only the name. Okay, so we can display this when you log in. You want to display the name. That's all. And also here, this the most important thing. That's for the logout. You know, it's a form. This is a PHP form. So you can see there's an action, so account/logout. And remember then the API endpoint that we created, the minimal API account/logout. The form, what it is pushed. So when it pushes the form, it's going to return home page. Isn't it going to return to the home page? Yes. So that's the logout. And now once it get the context or the HTTP context, we can now sign out peacefully. Okay. If I am not authorized, register and login, we have in there. If I'm authorized, then log out. So with this, we have to provide, or maybe you can already say this is register, this is log out, this is login, and that is all. So let's have register and now login. So this is a register. We must provide the route. There's login from the register on top. So this is register. Okay, so this is ready now. Now if I click on any page, so for now, don't worry, we're going to run this application and then test it out first. But before we test this up, we need to create a class that's going to inherit from the auth state provider, and that's going to implement the component state or the authentication state from the server, okay, in the client. So with less authentication, we're going to add a class in here, and now this class is going to be a persistent authentication state provider. This has to inherit from the main class, and that is the auth state provider. We need to implement an abstract, and that is the get authentication state. So within this, we can have a default auth state task. So let's assign it on top here. Then we're going to check when a page is being called, being rendered, this method is going to get fired. That is the instance of this. So we need to create a property. Where is the constructor or instance? Let's create constructor for this one. So generate constructor. Okay, so this is our constructor, and now within the constructor we're going to specify this persistent component state. This is coming from the server street, and I contain the state of the user. So in here we can now check if the person is authenticated. Then we want to create an instance of this user info, because this is what we are passing in. So we have to get this as an auth variable, okay? And now if it is null, then we want to return. So we can just exclude this and I make it just one line. Yeah, so if it is null, then if it is not null, then we're going to have this variable being holding the values from the state. Then we can now create the claims in here. So we need to extract the claims. So we have the user name ID, we have the name, and then the email. So after doing that, then we need to call this auth state, and now we assign the value to this. Let me close this. Okay, so the auth state, the authentication tags that we created earlier on here, you can see. So we are going to assign it to this, because here we have a new claim identity, and that's a claim that is coming in. Okay, so we assign it to this. After assigning, what are we doing? Then lastly, this method will get called, which is going to return authentication state. You see? So we can now go ahead, we can remove this the implementation, the class, and now we are good to go. So this is all that we need to do. We get the claims from here, we assign them, and then we pass on to the auth state. Then we can now tell the state that yes, we have what we need. So please keep on. Okay, very simple one. So after doing this, you go to solution, you go to program, and now you need to register this in the program. So here we're going to register authorization call, cascading auth state. Then we're going to add this as a singleton, so authentication state provider. Then that's the instance that we created now in here. Okay, so that's all we need to do in this. Now if you are not authorized and want to access unauthorized content, we want to redirect you okay, to log in. So when you check this from our route in here, you will see that we added this, and there's a time for us to create a component. We have to create that component in here. So in the pages, let's add a new razor component, redirect to login, and now inside this we need to inject our appdb content. We need to inject a nav manager, and now we want to navigate to this is only the login, not the account. So login slash, and it's going to be the return URL. So we are passing into this, right, to the URL to this login. So we can actually remove all this. Maybe in case you don't need this, we can move it, because I'm not using return URL for now. So all that you do here is navigate to login and now force load. Very simple one. You see that? Good. Now let's save this. So let's build the whole project again. Build solution. So we have an issue here that we need to be fixed, but we say it succeeded. When you click on this, we need to include, so control period, let's add the reference. Okay, let's test this out. Yes, we have an issue here because we have not added the token authentication service. That is the, let's see, okay, so that's the identity. So let's add it here. So we done services.add authorization, add authentication, and we have to specify the default scheme and the default sign-in scheme, and now .add identity cookies. You see, that is this one. Now also let's check from the register. We did not create the UI. You see this, so we have to create the UI, and in that it is just an edit form that we need to create, which is going to have the form for name, email, password, and confirm password. So here I'm going to paste this. It's just an edit form, and now it has this the input for email, it has password, and it has confirm password. Okay, in that you know already that we have to create a string property to handle an error in here to display. So within this you can have the string error, and in case we do have error, but for now we are not handling any error. Okay, so we can just remove this up. Let's take out this error. If you want to manage or handle the errors, you can actually do that, but we are not doing it now. Okay, so this is what we have, a very simple one with a button as register, and now we're going to submit to this register user method. Now let's run it again and then check it out. Okay, so the app is ready, and now let's see, we have a login and a register button in here. First of all, you're going to register because you haven't registered. So let's click Netcode-Hub, that's the name, as you know, and here I'm going to use admin at admin. Password, let me use admin at 123. Admin at 123. Click on register. Now let's see. Wow, nothing happens, but let's check it out. So from here, I've opened the table. If I refresh this, oh, okay, you see now we have it in here. You see, that is the name, Netcode, username, and now we have the normal username and then the email. Okay, so username and our name, we have it. Now let's go to login. So if I click on login, we have the email and password. Click on login, and I can see we have the email in here. So since the names have appeared twice, that is why it is taking the first one, and the first one automatically it is an email address. If you want to grab the second one, and that is the actual your name that we set, then we have to loop through the claims, and now we find out the names whereby you're going to have the results as 2, then we get the last one. Let's see how to work on that to display not the email, but rather the name of the authenticated person. So go to our source code, and now from here, that's our nav menu. That's where we are having this. So we can rather use the next line. So context.user.claim.where type is equal to our claim types.name. And now when you make it .first, you're going to have the email. So .last is going to give us the full name. Okay, so let's rebuild this and run it again, and now let's check it out. So you might see the email, you might see the name as well. So let's log in again, but before we log in, you right click on this inspect element, then we go to the application. So you can see from here the cookie, we have no authentication in here. Now click on login, and now let's log in and let's watch it out and see what's going to happen in here. Yeah, so you can see we have an token, that's a cookie token being up in here, and now you can see we have admin at Gmail, and no, admin at admin, and then we have Netcode-Hub. That is the name, isn't it? If I click on logout, what happens? You can see it is off, and now this one is also off. Let's create another account. So this time around is going to be Fred. Then there's going to be Fred at Fred. Password Fred at 123. Let's create the account. Okay. Now let's log in. Okay, so we are in. Like you see, we have Netcode-Hub, Fred at Fred, and it's supposed to be Frederick, but we are still having Netcode-Hub. You see this? Maybe let's see. Why are you having the same netcode? When you go to the table, and now if you refresh this, let's see what we have. Okay, so let's open this again. Oh, okay, so it was Netcode-Hub. We did not change it. So let's say this Frederick. Okay, so that is this one. We can now save this, and when we refresh the page, let's see what we're gonna have. Since we changed the database, we must see Fred in here. Okay, let's rebuild this again and I'll test it out. So I'll save this, we'll run this. Okay, and we have Frederick. Okay, we still have this. We're going to run this. Okay, so let's log in. Now let's wait and see. You must see Frederick. Yeah, that's what we have it. Let's log out. Let's create that account. And maybe here we're going to say your name. Your name is your name. So you@you.com. You@123. You@3. Now we're going to create an account here. Now you can see the name, your name. That is the name. Okay. Let's log in. Now let's see. Yes, so you can see we have your name. Yeah, this is working. Okay, so that is it for this video. We've seen how to create and consume this service, authentication service using cookie. Customize one in .NET 8 Blazor web app with interactive WebAssembly render mode. I've made a video on the server mode and also how to use JWT token in the server mode. So if you want to check those out, check the video description and you're going to find it in there. Alright, thank you so much for watching this, and I believe you've learned something, and hopefully I'm going to catch up again. Till then, take care.